Chapter 11, Conclusions. I challenged you at the end of the first chapter to come away from this book without thinking that you found something interesting and insightful in every school of thought. By that, I did not mean that I expected you to become a neoclassical, Marxist, Austrian, post-Keynesian, institutionalist, new institutionalist, feminist, ecological economist, but that you would at some point in every chapter see a concept that made you stop and consider what you had just read. As for myself, I did that very thing many times as I did the research for this volume. I thought I was an open-minded, pluralistic economist before writing this, and I suppose I was compared to many. However, my conviction has been magnified several times over as I have not only learned more about each paradigm, but experienced the kind, enthusiastic, and thoughtful manner in which representatives of the various schools of thought have offered help and criticism. Today, I have an even greater sense of respect for them and their colleagues. Mutual respect is a missing ingredient today, which is part of the reason why so many economists are not bothered to learn anything about alternative perspectives. And that ignorance then reinforces the dismissive attitude. This is unfortunate and something that self-respecting scientists should not do. This is an opinion shared by those in the pluralism movement. They believe that the economics discipline would benefit tremendously from a more open discussion, and that this would lead to a greater understanding and mutual respect. They argue that this is necessary not simply because it would be polite, but because science is not an inevitable march from ignorance to truth. As explained in chapters 2 and 3, neoclassicism did not emerge as the dominant school of thought after a spirited scholarly debate. We did not carefully sift through all the non-mainstream approaches and incorporate whatever was deemed helpful while dropping the rest. Rather, historical developments were responsible for putting neoclassicism at the top of the food chain, and institutional inertia and path dependence kept it there. It had not been proven that Marxism, Austrianism, post-Keynesianism, institutionalism, new institutionalism, feminism, and ecological economics were inferior. In fact, no one ever even tried to find out. Please note that this is not meant to imply that it is neoclassicism that should be dismissed. Far from it, it has insights every bit as useful and not as the others. Rather, it is the almost complete ignorance of the alternatives that is being decried here. The situation would be equally bad if history had conspired to put the Marxists, Austrians, or institutionalists on top, and then they suppressed other voices, intentionally or otherwise. The problem is that it is intellectually unhealthy to learn only one language. You never know how else it could be done or what is unique about your own approach, and you are condemned to thinking inside that box because you have no idea what lies outside it. As John Maynard Keynes wrote, "It is astonishing what foolish things one can temporarily believe if one thinks too long alone, particularly in economics, along with the other moral sciences, where it is often impossible to bring one's ideas to a conclusive test, either formal or experimental." Of course, your typical practicing economist cannot spend equal amounts of time studying each paradigm. She must, at some level, pick one because it is impossible to express a view except from a viewpoint. You cannot do a study on the impact of the minimum wage law from the neoclassical, Marxist, Austrian, post-Keynesian, institutionalist, new institutionalist, feminist, ecological perspective. Instead, what's being suggested here is that our goal should be to practice and teach economics in a manner similar to William G. Perry's last stage of learning, commitment. He hypothesized that college students started their course of study as dualistic thinkers who believe that there is a right and a wrong, and that the people at the front of the classroom are the authorities who will tell them which is which. One of our jobs as professors is to challenge this preconception and lead them to understand that multiple reasonable perspectives are possible. Ultimately, however, we want them to move to commitment, where they adopt a particular view to use as their guide, but only tentatively and always with the knowledge that I could be wrong. We want them to become mature, skeptical thinkers who realize that knowledge does not increase by slowly moving from darkness to light. In reality, there are tentative steps forward, followed by retreats and changes in direction. Unfortunately, this is not how economics has been done. On the plus side, the pluralism movement appears to be strong and growing. A watershed event was the French student protest in 2000. They made a plea for being taught approaches other than just neoclassicism, which they feared was out of touch with much of how the real world worked. This was an unexpected spark, and it ignited other student protests and led to the foundation of the Real World Economics Network. Today, the latter has over 26,000 subscribers and offers resources and publication outlets for those interested in seeing our discipline become more open. In addition, the International Journal of Pluralism and Economics Education was inaugurated in 2009. And an increasing number of universities appear to be developing courses along the lines of this book, although to my knowledge, ours is the only economics department where such a class is required of all majors. So, even if we're still a long way from pluralistic economics, it cannot be said that progress is not being made. It is my sincere hope that after having read this book, you are now part of that movement as well. One issue remains. I promised in Chapter 1 to conclude by telling you which schools of thought I tend to follow. I was trained as a neoclassical, but eventually found myself primarily in the post-Keynesian and institutionalist camps. Now you know.